All right, welcome back to Two Glasses and a Movie. This is Connor, and we're back again with another movie. This time we're talking about the movie Precious, which is a movie that came out in 2009 with a score of a pretty good IMDb score of 7.3, and at the time was really critically acclaimed as a really great movie, and was directed by Lee Daniels and was starring Gabby Sidibe. I'm not sure that's how you say her name or not. And Monique and Mariah Carey is also in this movie. And just a quick synopsis of this movie: an overweight, abused, illiterate teen who's pregnant with her second child is invited to enroll in an alternative school in hopes that she can reroute her life in a better direction. So, Tanner, what were some kind of initial thoughts you had with this movie?
It was by far, this is the, fourth movie we've done. By far the most just kind of serious, intense, kind of sad movie that we've done so far. So we want to talk about some of that, and we also want to, talk about some things that maybe are not so bleak about it. But part of the reason I picked this was going back and looking at kind of the few movies we've done. We did Showgirls, which was like the 90s. We did Gigli, which was like early 2000s. And then we did Gaslight, which was old, like the 40s. And so I had the idea, what if we try to find a movie from when we would have been teenagers, kind of in high school, because we haven't done, something like that yet. And, you and I watched lots of movies in high school. We went to the theater a lot. So finding something kind of from that time range that we hadn't seen and wanted to see was a little bit difficult anyway. Some
Yeah.
of the best stuff from then, if we didn't see it then, we have seen it by now. So that was part of why I picked this. I remember, and I guess I'll ask you, I remember hearing about this movie a lot back when it came out. Do you remember hearing about it?
I remember very little of hearing about it, and I remember seeing it a little bit here and there afterwards, but I didn't really hear. I knew of it, but I didn't really hear anything about it. But I did know of it. It wasn't like this was a movie I'd like never heard of or anything, or at the time didn't hear. But I did not know a lot about it. No.
The extent of like what all the story was, but it's just one of those where in general I like remember hearing Precious talked about a bunch, and I do feel like overall I've heard it referenced at different times in some type of way over the years. So that's kind of why we picked it. We were trying to look for something that, we might have seen when we were teenagers but that we hadn't seen yet. And so yeah, it one thing I did enjoy about it was the way it was shot. I thought was pretty interesting. It was set in 1987 and filmed in 2009, released in 2009, obviously. So they definitely did some editing and that type of stuff to make it look a little bit older. There was a decent amount of kind of jumpy cuts, kind of hazy stuff. So I thought that was interesting for, if I remember the mid 2000s, most movies were not really doing a style like that. They were maybe kind of more polished, more clean and sharp looking. So that was something I did enjoy.
Yeah.
The cinematography of it was pretty interesting. There were some times where even that felt maybe a little overdone, or there are some, if she's having a flashback to something traumatic, it would be pretty quick and out of nowhere. Another thing that was interesting, that was a little bit not super uncommon, but it was interesting. Part of the development of her character is that she has this big imagination, and she has, these aspirations of kind of being famous, maybe being very glamorous, these aspirations outside her life. So there's maybe 3 or 4 dream sequences, kind of where she is singing on a stage or she is doing a runway or something. And I did find those pretty interesting. And we could talk about, maybe a little bit later, we can talk about, what the point of those was or how they kind of incorporated into the film. But yeah, I think
Yeah, I was going to jump in for a minute. I like
yeah,
the
for sure.
I didn't notice as much throughout the movie until you start talking about just the shots that they did and what that kind of looked like. But I also thought about just kind of how simple a lot of the scenes were and the things they had, whether they were at school or she was at home or she was walking. Like, maybe that was a budget thing overall, but it was just a simple way of doing it, and maybe that was to bring back the late '80s and make it look like it was 1987 more too. But I feel like they just did a good job of kind of simplifying what through those shots and with everything and what it looked like.
Interesting. One thing I did find is that this was an indie movie, so I know it was at Sundance, and it looks like the budget was 10 million, which is not huge, but I would imagine that with that size of a budget, there was something that played into it. That there wasn't a lot of really big set pieces. There wasn't a lot of big scenes with a ton of extras. A lot of it is pretty character driven. You know, Gabby is the main character and is in probably every single scene. She sometimes with one other person, sometimes with a few people, but yeah, so some of that was interesting. It is a pretty intimate movie. It's kind of small, it's kind of very conversation driven in her different scenarios. And so yeah, I liked that. I liked the not a ton of important characters and not a ton of characters total, but I did like all I did enjoy, the different main characters that were in it for sure. It's interesting to talk about, this was relatively prestigious. It won at least a couple awards, maybe like Golden Globes. A couple people won stuff about it, and so it's interesting to talk about, a really kind of serious, intense movie. But then we're still, critics. We're still there's stuff where we're like, I didn't really like this aspect of it, or I didn't really like that aspect of it, and I think a little bit for me was like there was just a few times where it was like, no, we get it. She's in a bad situation. I think there were times when it's like, we don't necessarily need you to prove to us that she's in a bad situation. But then on the opposite hand, I think that's part of the point. It's like, it's about poverty, it's about abuse, it's about, trauma. And so they want to, get that point across that for this character, this is all day. Like, this is every day of what she's dealing with. So, from that perspective, I think they do a great job of making you stay in it. It's not supposed to make you feel good for most of the time. They want you to be experiencing, that tough life. And I think that's another positive thing. They did a good job of, they don't try to soften any of the like really hard stuff that's in it.
Yeah, I think that's what people liked about the movie and why it was acclaimed the way it was, because it was raw, it was real. I think people felt like, oh, this isn't like a totally like a Hollywood movie. In essence, it's like it was relatable in a lot of different areas to a lot of different people because of the different things that were happening, whether it was on a small scale with school issues and arguments to a larger scale with being pregnant or having a very very dysfunctional and not healthy relationship with mom with bio mom and no relationship with dad. So they just hit on all the spectrums of things that could be going on with a teenager, really with anyone, but in this case a teenager.
Uh, so she goes to this alternative school that is supposed to kind of promote, creative thinking, be a little bit outside of just sit in class and learn all these facts. I think, some of the point of this alternative school is to help people be able to kind of get out of a poverty situation, create, some new aspects for themselves. So I did enjoy, the teacher and the classmates. And I think that, another thing the movie did well was that overall kind of storyline is super common. Older ones like A Stand and Deliver or something like that. A movie probably around this time like Freedom Riders, that's, this teacher, a group of poor kids, and whatever. I think this movie did a good job of, standing out in that type of way. You have a lot of the similar beats that you need to get that that's what this part of the story is, but I didn't feel like it was copying anything. I think they used that aspect that has been done a lot before in a new way to kind of show some different things.
Yeah, I definitely got the Freedom Writers vibe when she went to the alternative school. That's like the first thing I thought of, but wasn't the same thing. It was and was a little bit different. So that's yes.
Overall, as we've kind of talked about it, I think there was a lot of different things that I kind of liked looking back on it. As I was watching, I didn't always like it, not just because it was dark, but I'm not sure I was always feeling just kind of engaged and moved forward in the story. And so I think if I had one kind of actual critique that I would stand by, is either like the way they wrote Precious's character or kind of the way that they had Gabby acting. The character seemed very like sleepy and detached and kind of like slow the whole time. And I'm
Well, that's the
guessing there
character.
was like a reason for that. Right. So I think as like the main character that I'm watching, I didn't feel super engaged with watching a protagonist that's like just barely getting by day to day,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah. No, it does. It
I
for sure
needed
does.
I needed some I needed some aspect of like kind of spark in her, which we do get a little bit as it goes on. But you know, if you're watching a main character that feels like they're kind of just moping along, I didn't connect, super strongly with that.
Yeah, I think
But as a
I think for me, like I totally agree with that, and I think is more real and like I said earlier, real and raw, and like that's why people connected with it. And it wasn't that Hollywood movie where there wasn't like this dramatic thing that happened, and was kind of her character, not only her character and herself is slower just paced in the movie, and just it's not not very high pace or anything like that for her character or the what happens in the movie in itself. And I think that isn't a bad thing, but it's just less interesting to me too. And I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with that and think that it was fine the way it was. But yeah, I feel the same way.
it's one of those movies where there's not a whole lot that you could critique about it, I don't think, as far as how they told the story. The quality of the acting was good. And so a couple of those, feeling like maybe I didn't connect to her character, that's more just a me thing and not necessarily so I think they should have done it differently. So I think an interesting thing as maybe a context for that character and also just a fun tidbit, I was double checking. So my first time that I saw Gabori Sidibe, I'm gonna say her name once. The first time I saw Gabby was in American Horror Story season 3, and I really
Yeah.
love her in that. It's a great character. She's very uh kind of outspoken and all this. So then seeing this version of her it was just super different. But something that's interesting, and I double checked on IMDb, this is like literally her first acting credit. No TV show appearances, no small roles. So I would be interested on maybe doing a little bit more research to figure out like how did she get the role. But that's pretty interesting. Her literal first acting role is like a pretty vivid character it's a pretty like movie that turns out big. I think there's something to definitely be said about just the chops of an actor who kind of does this performance their very first time around.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree for sure.
I'm going to run through plot point by plot point in this movie because it doesn't feel like necessary exactly. It's not the type of movie similar to our other ones where we have all these moments where we're like, that part was confusing, or like, why'd they do that? There's not a lot of like, big stuff like that to talk about. So I think what we're going to do is talk a little bit more about, some context things about the movie, or, kind of the way that our experience of it was. So to start off, did you have a question of some kind that you wanted to ask me about it?
I got a few different questions, and some we like kind of talked about, and some we talked about earlier. But one overall, like why do you feel like this is a movie that was nominated for so many awards and won some of the awards too, and is just looked at as a great film, overall.
So being, anytime, maybe I'm not going to say it like that. A lot of times when you have a movie starring a completely unknown actor, it's already going to get some buzz. And if I had planned ahead, I would have like, oh, some other example, like this person's breakout role. So I think a little bit it's that there was some hype around it for that reason. And one thing I did look up, this was at the Sundance Film Festival. So that's one of those where, when it first got to Sundance, I would guess there was, a small amount of hype, but then people there really liked it, and it probably got picked up by a bigger studio. And so one thing as I was looking, I read, a couple things, looked on IMDb a little bit. Monique, who plays her mom, I personally was not like familiar with her, but she was on a little bit before this, she was on a big kind of network sitcom type show. So I think in some ways this was like a big departure. It was this like very like dark, angry kind of character that for other people who maybe already did have an experience of Monique, this was kind of like really crazy. For me, I was not familiar with her, so this is the first time that I know for sure I'm like seeing her in something. So I didn't have that experience of it the way that some other people might have.
Yeah, those are solid. I get that. I think one thing I would add to those is I think a lot of movies have one or two or maybe three feel scenes, and this is normally like the climactic scene in a movie, or a really 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 big part of the movie.
Oh yeah.
That's a big deal, and it just makes it makes you feel you're like really connected to the characters, or it's a really intense thing that happens. And this movie had like five or six. Some were short. Sometimes some of them were like really really small parts. But I feel like they had a handful of really intense, emotional, real scenes where like, wow, that's traumatic, real. That is something that people have gone through, and they don't always, they don't always talk, would talk about that. And um, a couple that I really liked a little bit longer, like her mom and hers argument at the beginning of the movie, the apartment was really good. I just think that was a really, I mean, probably a common argument that a abusive mom would have with a daughter like that. I feel like they just nailed that scene really, really well. Not that I have, coming from
Yeah.
a white guy with no experience in that, so I'm looking at it from really far away. But I feel like that I just think they did a really good job with that. I feel like overall, and then a very quick scene that you almost would miss. You could have missed potentially watching it. One morning she's like in the living room and her mom's upstairs in the bedroom, and she like calls her to come upstairs, and like that's a quick scene basically, but she's calling her to like come pleasure her mom, because she can't, or yeah, her mom, because she can't do it herself. And that was really quick, but that was another scene where I was like, wow, and that just like 5 seconds, I was like, that was just another example of like, yeah, this is just a lot of trauma that's happening with this teenager, and you're like, wow, this has probably happened, a lot before. before that too. So I think they had a handful of really good feel punches that they had kind of throughout the movie.
And I think a few of those times, there's a few of those scenes where you kind of see it escalating, and when it gets to the worst point, you saw it coming a little bit. There's a few of those scenes that really pop in out of nowhere, and I think that's one of those that was like on purpose because maybe it's her having a flashback to something bad that had happened. The director kind of puts that right in front of you out of nowhere as, on purpose, because for a person who has been through that, some of that stuff really came out of nowhere for them, and then B, those times where they get triggered, those times where they have a flashback, that's kind of real life for people. Something unconnected will pop them right back into that spot. And so, yeah, I think the movie did a good job of keeping you off balance a little bit of like, oh man, like things had calmed down, maybe there was a good thing happening, and then it kind of draws you back to that tough scene where you get just like, oh man, like that's hard to see.
Yeah. Do you feel like there could have been, what could the movie have done to be, one step better, one level better? It got a 7.3, which is really good, but could have done something to get hit like an 8 and be even more of like it would have won probably more awards then. Is there something that it could have done to just take the next level and be an even better movie? You feel like
If I don't know, I almost wonder if the like really dark, difficult parts of it needed to last so long throughout the movie. Maybe you change it around in a little bit of a way where the first act you kind of are getting all those toughest moments, and then a little bit more of the movie is kind of watching her grow through it, get past a few things. That's not, now I'm not saying for sure that would have made it better, because I think even down to the last 15 or 20 minutes, you get a couple of the kind of most intense, impactful scenes. So that's just me pitching something. Maybe it goes, maybe it hits that more like really kind of inspirational movie, but by doing it in that way, maybe you lose some of the, no, we want you to just see like how tough this is and how these difficult situations kind of persist. So that's just an idea.
yeah, gotcha. I'm not sure if I had something totally that would land on it. The only thing I thought about, which I don't know if it would take away from the movie, but I feel like I wanted there to be a better win at some point, and maybe that's just the routine of Hollywood movies that I've seen hundreds of those, and that's what I'm programmed to want to see maybe. But I wanted something, I don't know
Right.
what that would have been, and I wouldn't want it to be too big, because if it was too big, it would have taken away from the raw and realism of it. But I wanted something more, a little bit something more of a win, for her. And I don't know for sure what that would be, what the perfect thing would have been. But I'm not sure totally they could have changed or done that much differently in the movie, because it would have ruined kind of what the movie was overall.
Yeah, I think seeing, cause we do get a little bit of seeing her, like she is learning. We get to see her like learning a little bit. We get to see her kind of going through the pregnancy and some of that stuff. And then at the very, very end, it does end on a relatively hopeful note. She basically has this kind of last interaction with her mom where she's like, you have done enough to me, and I'm gonna walk away now. And we get that at the very end, but I agree kind of on that point. I would like to see, maybe 15 or 20 minutes of getting to see her kind of having a better life, but the movie kind of ends at the beginning for her of getting to have something a little better going on.
Yeah.
Gonna put you on the spot a little bit, and just to get your thoughts. So without going into like real specific details, I'm interested to know, given that you work with kind of underprivileged kids, probably in some similar situations, I was interested if you had any kind of thoughts about this movie from the perspective of having seen a lot of just tough situations and a lot of kids who are going through a lot of stuff on their own too.
Yeah, I don't, that's something I was thinking about as I watched this movie, and not, not always to this extent, but a lot of the scenes, like with her and her mom, are at home, at home in an apartment, and they're by themselves, and so you get to kind of see a peek of what this kind of looks like. And that's a lot, not every kid, but that's a lot of kids that, that come to the center. They have some type of traumatic experience that has happened or is currently happening, and they're dealing with it, whether it's past or present. And each kid's a little bit different, and each kid needs to be poured into a little bit different to help them heal. And that looks different for a lot of the different kids. And for Precious, she needed someone to be, I think she ends up going to the alternative school and has a small school setting, but then she has a teacher who is kind of pouring into her a little bit more than what she was going to get at a public school. But she just needed, someone to be a champion in her life, and spend a little bit extra time to find that need for her. Because sometimes sometimes that was writing skills. Sometimes I was like, well, in one of the scenes, she needed to find her a safe place to stay, for the night. And that's in general, a lot of the kids that come, like, we're trying to figure out what their best need is. Because some of it's physical needs, sometimes it's emotional needs, social needs. I mean, they all have different needs to be met, and we just try to fill that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
So I definitely thought about that a lot. And again, not to that extent, but I mean, every kid's got something that's going on, something that they're dealing with, and that's going on at home. And like we want to be that type of place and that type of person that's going to be able to pour into them.
The context that you guys are in, so Mariah Carey is kind of a social worker. I think she, in some type of way, is working with them on kind of government assistance or something like that. And in a couple of the scenes, she's talking to Precious, or she's talking to her mom, and trying to get some information from them about some situations. And, Precious is hesitant to talk because she has a lot of her own fears about what's going to happen if I mention this, etc. The mom is hesitant to talk because the mom knows that she has been abusive, and she knows that she has let stuff happen. So I thought it was an interesting, that character of the social worker, just the difficulty of that job sometimes is just trying to get accurate information and finding out like what is going on so we can figure out how we're going to help you with it.
Yeah, I think the most important thing between in this scene between these two people is the trust and the relationship. And you don't really build that going to an office and like meeting with someone. And that's a little bit going back to the center. That's what the high school and college students that are working with the kids that see them a lot, like that's what they naturally build with them. And unfortunately, they're not the social worker that's meeting with them, and that's always going to be connected into their resource and their needs. But they're building the other side of that with that relationship part. And unfortunately, that's what that looks like. Whether there are really big things going on in their life or not, like they're going to go meet with someone. Like if they don't have for that relationship, most people aren't going to just trust someone off the bat like that to help them or help them take kind of whatever their next step is.
With Precious, and then sort of connected to some of the work you do, at the start of the movie, Precious probably doesn't have like a positive relationship with almost any adults. Not her mom, not her dad, her grandma a little bit. Her teachers are probably just on her most of the time. The principal is probably just on her most of the time. And so it's really not until she meets this new teacher, and even when she meets her, you're not just going to trust someone right off the bat. And so this is kind of the first adult that maybe listens to her, the first adult that is not automatically saying you're dumb and you can't achieve anything. And I think part of the message of the movie is, for some kids like this, it only takes like that one thing. It only takes like that one push of, hey, I think that you could do a lot. I see something in you. And then from that point all the way through the rest of the movie, she's really only making those steps forward and making that progress. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Kind of another question I had that could lead into what we kind of chatted about earlier about talking about. Do you feel like this is a movie that will always be looked at, the same 2009 to now 2024 to 2054, in another 30 years? Is this a movie that's always going to hold up and be the same, have the same type of effect that it had when it would have came out?
9 to 2024 is like 15 years or so. So I would say, for me, watching it right now, I do think it felt relatively dated already. It felt a little bit. I think that watching it now had a little bit less impact than it would have even, 15 years ago. So I would say, if I had to go like yes or no, I would maybe lean towards no, that I don't think it's going to have like a really significant long-term impact. If I was just giving like a basic like yes or no. But I think as far as like the content and the story of it, I think it's 100% still relevant to stuff that literally for sure still goes on in people's houses and kids' lives day to day right now. So I think it's definitely relevant still if you were to watch it. But I don't know if kind of culturally, even 15 years later, if it's something where people are talking about it or really referencing it all the time, or something else in that type of way. What did you think? Did you have a thought either way on that?
I mean, I'd give it a yes. I think it would still hold up. I mean, mainly from what you said, a yes. Like the story, what's happening in her life, like that's always going to be happening at some point. And the fact that it does, when it came out, it was already almost,
Yeah,
20,
sure.
20 years later, because it was in 87 and it came out in 09. It still was powerful then. So that time difference didn't make a difference in it overall. So I still feel like it's going to hit the same. It's going to hit you or it's not going to hit you, no matter when you're going to watch it, because it is, as we talked about earlier, it is a movie that is focusing on, it's not the plot, but it's the characters in it, and the characters are gonna hold up, and what they say and what they experience will hold up over time. So I would say, yeah, if I was going to give it a yes or no, I would say yeah. I think it will hold up over time.
So I had one other kind of question to pose to you, but I think it might be interesting to save that kind of for the end when we wrap up. Do we want to talk about maybe just a couple other things, of maybe something about the director a little bit, some things about, maybe the production or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. What else? What other stuff on it you want to talk about specifically? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So I had something. So I realized when I asked that, I was saying it because I was like, well, I have something I can say, and then I asked
Yeah.
you,
Go
and
ahead,
like I
man.
was just waiting for you to say something.
Grip it and rip it.
Yeah. So the directed by Lee Daniels, and so he's definitely a director where I remember hearing the name, and for me the connection was, I remember hearing in 2013 the movie The Butler, which was about this butler in the White House who was there for a really long time. And so I remember when they were promoting it and even on the poster and stuff, the movie was called like Lee Daniels The Butler. So that was kind of my, first time maybe I'd heard about him back in 2013. And that was a pretty big movie. I think that a lot of people liked it and it was talked about a lot. And then something that's interesting, there's a movie called The Paperboy, which I really liked, that's also by him, and it's not remotely similar in terms of the type of movie, the storyline, anything to The Butler. And then, Lee Daniels had one movie before Precious, which I haven't heard of. It doesn't have a very good score. So it's just kind of interesting that's really, I mean, there's 5 movies that this guy has directed in almost 20 years. And I don't know, that's interesting. The kind of 3 main ones that were at least close together, 2009, 2012, and 2013, are all very different. I think they were received in very different ways. And then, I mean, he hasn't done a lot since then. He had a movie a few years ago, but it had been, like an 8-year break as far as movies go. And then, as we talked about, this is Gabby's very first movie. And I think, based on kind of my experience, she's had like a pretty big career overall. I've seen her in a decent amount of different things, and I feel like she may not be, I don't know if her name is like A-list celebrity status, but I think people kind of recognize her. People, at least know of her pretty well. So it's interesting to watch, the very first movie someone was in, and then to see what goes on later.
Yeah, I thought everything with the directing, I totally agree. And I remember when The Butler came out, and like that's when I first heard his name, and didn't know till I re-looked at it that he had directed The Paperboy too. Because I mean,
Yeah.
I like that movie, and that was, I'm pretty
So
sure that was
different.
yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. If I had to guess, I'm assuming that was like an independent movie. I don't know for sure. I'd have to like look that up.
Yeah.
But it's so weird that he only has a handful of directing credits, and mainly produces stuff overall, and what he's done recently. Um, so yeah, I thought that was it.
We always find kind of like box office type stuff interesting. So on IMDb, it's got the budget listed as estimated 10 million, which we kind of talked about. I think that's relatively low. And so the overall gross worldwide ended up being 63 million. So for this type of movie, a $10 million budget, I would say that, like, by and large, lots and lots of people went and saw this movie. I think that's, pretty big return for a movie that didn't have any type of studio backing it when it was actually made. It was submitted to Sundance and got picked up later. I think that's a pretty great return, and I think it deserves having really done well like that.
Yeah, I mean making 6 times your budget on it is extremely successful. I mean I think 3 times would be successful. So making 6 times is really impressive for an indie movie that wasn't a huge deal, but just did get success and got people out to see it. That was one of the first things I saw as I was kind of looking up some stuff on it. Making 6 times your budget overall is crazy.
I think that's probably a good enough wrap up on kind of our overall thoughts on the movie. So I wanted to end on just kind of a interesting question that I thought of. So we talked about, this came out in 2009. That's part of, specifically why we picked it. Find a movie that came out. So I would have been 17 roughly. You would have been maybe 16. And so it's interesting, we were seeing all kinds of movies. This wasn't something we saw. So I thought it'd be interesting just to wrap up of kind of talking about, A, maybe why we didn't end up seeing it, and then B, if we were to speculate, what might we have thought if we went to the theater and saw this when we were 17? So do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. I know. I think I would have had zero interest to go see this movie. It's pretty rare in high school that like I would have wanted to see a drama. I think overall, especially I'm imagining the trailer for it too, and it would have been a really slow drama. I feel like seeing it. So I'm sure I would not have been interested to go see it. And then seeing it, I mean, I'm not sure in high school, I mean, how many movies I had saw where someone may have had a few of these things. This movie had everything, where there was, rape that had gone on, and she had not only one child, but she had a second child that was on the way. A really dysfunctional relationship with her mom. So there's a handful of things that they have in this movie with her, and I don't think I saw movies that had that kind of recipe and all those things in one movie. So I would have been pretty taken aback, I think, and pretty, you know, I wouldn't say I was sheltered overall, but not didn't have the same internet access that we do now on stuff. We had high speed internet. It wasn't the Stone Age by any means, but well, at least I did. I know you had to wait a while to get that high speed, man. So
Oh
I know
yeah.
that's a long time coming.
Oh yeah,
But
dude.
had internet, but it wasn't as easy. Didn't have a smartphone in my pocket, and hadn't been exposed, whether it was more real life or more movies. That would have been pretty early in my life to see something like this. So I would have been probably a little shell shocked, and would have been like, no, I'm assuming I wouldn't have liked the movie. Very very much into like action movies and comedies, Step Brothers and Bourne movies and superhero movies. Like all the movies I felt like we were trying to watch at that time. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think I would have liked it, and I don't think it would have been a good experience, and I don't think it would have been a good time to see it. For me, it would have been a bad time being like 16 and seeing that for me. So what about you?
17, I definitely was watching, like some older movies, watching probably just starting to get into maybe watching some stuff that was like a little bit darker, a little bit more intense subject matter, etc. But yeah, same. I grew up in a small town in Indiana with a lot of farms around, a lot of exclusively white people. This wouldn't have been the type of movie where I see the trailer and go, oh man, like, I gotta go get to that. This is right up my alley. And kind of like what you had said, and I think the same way. I mean, I think if I had seen this at 17, I think it would have, in some type of ways, like, scared me, honestly, because I'm not sure that at 17, I really even had the concept that, like, people were having these types of experiences with all this different stuff that you mentioned. I think that it certainly would have had an emotional impact on me of just like, it would have made me very sad to see this. Whereas obviously now I had an emotional experience of it, like, man, this is tough. But at the same time, I'm 15 years older. I have seen a lot more of this stuff. I've read more things. I've seen more movies that have a lot of this type of content. So it was still impactful for me now, but I was able to kind of experience it with having already seen and heard a lot of this type of stuff in the past. So I think it's interesting to kind of look back and consider what it might have been like for us experiencing it at the time.
And I know for sure if you were watching this at home, your mom would have walked in at that couple second scene where she was getting raped by her dad, because I know that that type of thing happened to you a lot, where it was like the most uncomfortable scene in a movie, and your mom would walk in at that time. So
Yeah, it could be like 15 total seconds in a movie where something was inappropriate, and that's just when they're gonna walk in, and you're like, listen, this really is not what this whole movie is. You picked literally the worst possible time to walk in, for sure. So that I think that kind of wraps up on the discussion of Precious overall. So I would say, uh, if we were gonna do, I think we always kind of do like a general rating, a general what's your kind of final call on it. So give a couple things about what you'd say on it.
yeah, we could do after this. We do some. Let me fire through some fun facts when we get done.
Okay,
But
yeah, I'm down.
kind of final rating. I felt like we've kind of talked about this, but boy, I felt like this was a movie with 5 or 6 really really intense scenes that were surrounded by just like not a lot of stuff going on. It was just like a slow plot, and was something of like, oh boy, they could have taken the hour and a half of the other movie and like done 20 minutes, and I would have had kind of the same story. I felt like so part of it was like not being entertained enough, to me, and then the other part's just not being like as interested maybe. So I think I would give it a 6. I do get why it got a 7.3. I understand why it was nominated, and there was a lot like parts that I really like. The movie in general, I like the plot of it. I like that they showed, what this teenager was going through. Like I liked that, and I liked a handful of the scenes that really just like made me feel and was like, oh man, like I'm just like, I feel so bad for Precious in this moment. So I had a lot of those times too. But overall, like I didn't wasn't super excited or enjoyed the movie overall. So I think I'd land on a 6 on it.
It's hard to score even for me, kind of based on type of scorings I use, because I'm going to give a few different things. I feel, we love IMDb, and there's a lot of, it's just interesting to see where I line up. I think a 7 is pretty good. I think that the movie is very effective at what it's trying to do, and that's something that's important to me. It's trying to tell a really serious story. It's trying to be very character driven. It's trying to, kind of expose some dark aspects of people's lives. And I think for all that, it's really effective. So I think it's a really good movie for that aspect. Like you said, it's certainly not an enjoyable movie, but I don't think it's supposed to be. So I think it's hard to say, I kind of use the thing of, do I think it's good and do I like it? I think it's definitely a good movie. I think it's well made, and I think it's important and all that. And I think if I had to stick to like the way I actually, choose that scale, I think I would have to say I liked it, because I liked the way that it did a lot of things, with the same, balance of, I did not enjoy the movie. It was kind of a sad, bleak experience. But I think an overall quote unquote good experience, because I think the movie did what it was trying to do really well.
So what number are you giving this?
5 is fair.
You're giving it a higher score than what it has on IMDb.
I think it's a 7.5.
I heard you say I didn't enjoy this movie, and you're still giving it a 7.5. That's
Yeah, because
crazy.
I think I have to. Well, I think I explained all of why. I don't think you're supposed to enjoy watching the movie. So I'm rating it on how good and effective it is at doing its thing.
I
If
think
I'm gonna
sad
rate it
movies
on
can
how
still be
much I enjoyed
enjoyable.
it, I'd give it like. No, for sure. I think some. Actually, yes. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had written that down and I wanted to talk about that. I love really dark, intense, depressing movies in many cases. I think the reason that this did not hit that note is that it's just so realistic to life. So it's hitting that like it's like I don't know, there's like a really dark, sad, depressing movie that I'm like, that was awesome, dude. And then there's really sad, dark, depressing movie where I'm like, man, that was really just a bummer.
Yeah.
That's where this one fell for me. I think it's funny
My,
that for you, me giving it a 7.5, which is zero 0.2 above IMDb, you're like, you gave it a 7.5, dude? You bumped it up by 0.2, dude? Like, the way your brain works sometimes is wacky.
that's a lot, dude. Point two is a lot on a jump, and to give a movie like more than something, I feel like we should have been talking about how great it was the whole time, and we didn't. You didn't really do that. I didn't really do that, and I just can't believe you gave it a higher score. Like that's crazy. I mean, I would have maybe accepted
I
if
think
you
our
said 7.
different. You said 0.2 is a lot, and I think out of 10 total, 0.2 is not particularly a lot.
It's more that the 0.2 was a plus 0.2 that you gave it
Okay.
0.2 more. That's what it is. The addition of it.
I think 7.5 is a fair score for sure.
I think we can probably just agree that you're wrong about it, and that's a crazy. That's kind
I
of.
think we can agree you care too much. That's for sure something we could agree on, dude.
Yeah. I'm gonna lose sleep.
I'm not gonna let you bully me, dude. I watched Precious and I learned not to let people bully me. So, you know what?
Dude.
I change it. I'm gonna give it a 7.7.
Well, I don't even know you anymore, man. This is absurd. That's crazy. You know, speaking
That's
of
the point of the podcast. How long does it take till we fight and break up?
A quick thing before I talk about some fun facts. One really short scene when she's like going through the alley and there's these two kids and one of them says something and then one of them gets up and like pushes her down. I was just like, all right, like I don't think that would like happen, and like nothing happened to promote that. I felt like that was like kind of extreme. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like, oh yeah, that happens all the time, and that it just seemed like nothing promoted it, and like would that really happen? Would two teenagers really, one of them really run up and like push some stranger down to the ground? I don't know. Like that seemed like weird.
I mean, kids are assholes for sure, but it didn't make any sense really that like some kid would just push some other kid for no reason. I don't know. I think if you're in the head of like that kid though, what promoted it is that he like said something rude to her and she didn't respond. So that made him even more mad. So he's like, well, I gotta go shove her then. Yeah, I don't think it made sense. I don't think it was like necessary.
The guy at Walmart today should have came up and shoved me then when they were trying to sell some internet or something, and I walked by and he's trying to sell me something, and he's like, hey, what kind of internet you got? And I was like, and I told him I was good on internet, and then he said, oh, so you got like AT&T and Verizon? And I just kept on walking. So he should have came up and shoved me since I just ignored him.
I probably wouldn't even have given the first answer personally. I just walk right past people.
Well, yeah, I felt like it would have been like completely rude if I did that, and I did take the chance to like walk right next to him, and we did kind of make eye contact. So I felt like I at least had to give a response, but then it was like I'm still and I get their salesmen. You know, it's a separate company that's like coming in there and got their table set up and stuff. And I actually was like, man, I felt like I was like a 50-year-old, and I was like, where's a Walmart survey around here where I could tell them that like I don't want this company here trying to sell me stuff while I'm already trying to buy other stuff from other companies that you guys have in your store. Like, this is crazy, man. Like, come on. Yeah.
Do you think I don't have internet in 2024?
Well, they're trying to give you a better price, you know?
Yeah, dude, even deal. Better internet. You're like, I could go find it on my own. I'm not trying to go to Walmart to get sold internet.
We got 6Gs, man. It's the best internet around.
Yeah, dude, you're probably missing out, actually.
Probably. So I got a handful of.
We got to land this plane. Give us some fun facts.
Yeah, hit these fun facts here. So I won't go over all of them. So just like here's just a few that were kind of the best ones. So Monique was actually a victim of incest herself, and that's why she took this role, and she wanted to raise awareness to it. So I thought that was really interesting, of why she did that. So that was pretty cool. Gabby was in college. She was a lot older than what she was playing. She was like 26 when this came out or something like that. But she said she had a friend that told her about the audition, and she didn't plan on going to it. She's going to class, but her road was blocked to go to school because they were filming American Gangster, and because the road was blocked, she decided to go to the audition instead because she couldn't get to class because the road was blocked. So,
oh man, yeah.
So the book is actually called Push, but they changed the title to Precious. Instead of Push, and do you know why they may have done that?
I know for sure there's one other movie called Push. that may have come out at the same time or something.
Yes, yep. So they didn't want to get confused with the other movie with Push that was coming out. That was like Jumper's rival or something. I don't really that movie didn't really catch on or anything. Uh, but yeah, so they didn't want to get confused with
Yeah, for sure.
another movie, so they changed the title to Precious. And it only took 5 weeks to shoot, which I was kind of looking it up, and for an independent movie like that's common, low end, but that is like a normal. It is a number that like you could hit for it, but I still couldn't believe like 5 weeks. I mean that's crazy. That they did that so quick.
Like a full couple-hour movie, 5 weeks. I mean, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty fast for a movie shoot. Yeah.
So any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
A lot of times we'll do like a recommendation type movie. I think if you care about kind of social issues, if you can kind of handle seeing some pretty intense stuff, I think it's a movie that's worth watching. If you want to kind of like enjoy a movie, probably don't watch it.
Yeah.
Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah, no, I would. I don't have anything to add. I think I did owe that.
A couple just general kind of last minute things, not about this. I think, next time around, for me personally, I'm ready to go back to watching something that probably sucks that we can make fun of and laugh about. We'll circle back to, some serious Oscar bait kind of movies a little later on. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll definitely next episode we'll definitely hit up just our critically acclaimed bad movie, and we could talk about that and see why it was bad, and maybe we'll be able to fix it, and we'll see what happens. So
mode for sure,
because that's what we're really here for. We're really trying to fix movies that were just made poorly.
Highly qualified.
Yeah. Oh man, if that was a job, that'd be awesome. You could just fix old movies that were done bad, and try to redo them. That'd be awesome.
Just go listen. Let me tell you. Here's what you should have done. I think we would excel. I'd hit that up tomorrow, dude.
That'd be sweet.
Well, on that note, right. I think we're gonna go ahead and call it the end. This is Two Glasses and a Movie. I'm Tanner.
And I'm Connor, and it was great hanging out with you guys.